Welcome. This is part 2 of a series of videos I'm doing that is showing how ground solar minimum news is deceiving its viewers and lying about the climate and the sun. In part 1, we saw them make up a completely fictitious story about me just to do some character assassination. In part 2, we're actually going to do some science. Jake and Marie, if that's their real names, showed us this graph. They seem to like this graph for some reason. It was produced by Cliff Harris and Randy Mann. Cliff Harris claims to be a climatologist, which he isn't. He has published no papers on the subject of climatology. And Randy Mann is not a meteorologist, he's a TV weatherman, which is very, very different. So this is a graph of dubious source to start with. It's pushing the link between volcanic activity and solar radiation, which is pure nonsense. And I've dealt with that in previous videos if you care to look them up. Jake and Marie used this to show how warm it was 3,000 years ago and pointed out quite correctly that there were no SUVs or sources of carbon dioxide to make it very warm back then. So this is all part of a natural cycle. That is not a logical conclusion from the data that we have available. There can be many causes of changes in global temperature, and SUVs and carbon dioxide is just one of them. The carbon dioxide happens to be the one that's operating most effectively at the moment. Let's see what they don't point out. You notice here in this little circle that it says now is 2014. That means that this plot is at least 8 years out of date. One wonders why they don't use a more recent version. We'll get to that in a minute. Harris and Mann also point out that they are predicting that it's going to get cooler by 2019. And we'll see that that prediction was false. Well, if they couldn't be bothered to find a newer version of that plot, I did. It was very easy. It took me about 5 minutes on the internet. It's by Randy Mann, as you can see here in the top left. So it's by the same people. Can you see the differences though? The immediate and most obvious difference is over here on the right. Temperatures don't go down as Mann predicted 8 years before, they actually go up. The peak temperature is now higher than 3,000 years ago. Again, something very inconvenient for ground solar minimum news because the difference could be explained by all those SUVs that are around now that weren't around when there were just chariots. Also, these meteorologists and climatologists are now blaming fossil fuel emissions for the increase in temperatures, something that I'm sure the ground solar minimum news doesn't want to hear. So they ignored this or couldn't bother to look for it because they already had a piece of data that supported their case. That's not science. So why use the 2014 version and not the 2021 version? Well, this is a plot of the temperature anomalies for the last 40 years. Here is 2014. A year pretty typical of the warming times that we were having. Following this year, we had 7 of the warmest years on record. And you wouldn't want to include those in your plot because your claims of global cooling caused by a ground solar minimum would go to pot. And by the way, it looks as though 2022 so far is going to make it 8 of 8. So here again, we have another faux pas where they are guilty of cherry picking the data. So let's summarize. They showed us a bunch of out-of-date data from a dubious source, omitted data that would have contradicted their assertions, cherry picked the results. These are all major faux pas when you are trying to put forward a scientific case, as they claim to be. I think they need to fire their researcher. Sorry, Marie. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.